Vince Scully being interviewed by Sal Paolantonio. Vince Scully called his final Dodgers game October 2nd, 67 years in the booth. He was at the White House to receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Barack Obama. And on the scene was one Sal Paolantonio.
Very cool.
Happy Thanksgiving to you, Sal. That was a pretty nice assignment for you.
It was, Mike. Really was. Happy Thanksgiving to you and all your listeners. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. And, that's a really cool honor there to be in that environment. Vince Scully, at 89 years old, he's going to be next week, and seems like he could probably do what he did for another 10 years the way he was going.
He was a pleasure to interview. It's the first time I met him. He's always been a hero of mine. And I loved what he told me off camera. I said to him, what is the key to being a successful broadcaster? And he said, it's the same thing as an actor. He said, Laurence Olivier once told him, you have to be humble enough to prepare, but confident enough to deliver.
Really cool. That was really cool to see that moment there. Sal Pal's with us here on a special Sal Pal Wednesday, as obviously the Eagles on Monday, we're off on Friday. So, Sal, a lot to dive into here, where it seems that Nelson Agholor's name has been brought up ad nauseum this week, and I'd really like to get your take on which direction do you think the Eagles should go with Nelson? I mean, Doug did not come out and say he was going to play him. He said that he did talk to a sports psychologist. But Nelson coming out, saying what he did has really put him under the microscope here. So where do you think the Eagles need to go? What's the next step for them with Nelson Agholor?
Well, Mike, let's call it what it was. Doug Pederson put Nelson Agholor on double secret probation, and he did it publicly. First he said he wasn't sure whether Agholor was going to start. So he basically admitted that his starting wide receiver was on probation. And secondly, he said, I've got to see how he reacts in practice before I commit to him. And thirdly, he admitted publicly, which I'm sure Nelson Agholor and his agent, his business partners, his family's not too crazy about. The head coach admitted publicly that Agholor has been seeing a sports psychologist. So all of that is unprecedented, clearly way out of whack for a first-round pick. Very unusual that you would admit it publicly. Mm-hmm. And I think now he's put more pressure than ever on Agholor. He's admitted he's seeing a sports psychologist. He's admitted that he's on some kind of psychological probation. And he's admitted that he's not sure that he's going to start the guy.
Right.
Boy, oh boy, talk about pressure.
Yeah, so is the best decision for Doug and the Eagles to just sit him Monday night, let him clear his head, watch the game, play Paul Turner, or do you think it's best to get him out there, get him involved early, and try to regain this former first-round pick's confidence?
Yeah, I am not going to presume to give Doug Pederson advice here, but I will say this. He obviously has decided to watch him and watch him very closely to see how he reacts. There's an old saying, it's not how you act, it's how you react.
Right.
It separates the haves from the have-nots in this life. So Nelson Agholor basically is on the clock. He's on the psychological clock, if you will.
Yeah.
And we'll see. And Doug Pederson will see. I think Doug Pederson has an open mind. But if he's been seeing a sports psychologist for the last couple of weeks, that to me is the news of the day.
No doubt about it. Sal Paolantonio is with us. I was a little taken back by that too, because the thought process is, okay, when did this happen and who recommended it? Because you wonder when Nelson came out after the game and said, look, I'm letting it get to me mentally. Did the coach overlook this? Had he not known how far it has gotten, or did they know that he was going through some of these mental struggles?
Yeah, very much so. Huge, major headline with lots of unanswered tentacles. No question about it. Never heard of it before, especially concerning a former first-round pick in his, is he in his third year, right? Second year. Second year, right?
Yep.
Second
because
year.
I was going to follow up with this. How much, remember, Sal, a couple of years ago, it was, well, wide receivers, it's not till that third year is when they really take that next jump. How much of the expectations, because of some rookie standouts like a Beckham, and others, have put more pressure on these first-year wide receivers to do something that typically we gave them 3 years to do?
Well, this is a special case. There's always pressure in the NFL, but it's obvious that Nelson Agholor is having trouble. He's admitted it, handling it. I am hard-pressed to believe that Nelson Agholor, unless he gets his act together, is going to be around next year.
Very interesting because of the salary, obviously, right? That always comes into play, how much money, because there's a lot of Eagles fans that Sal, they want him cut immediately. Get rid of him. He can't catch the ball. He's hurting the team, but a lot of times money takes over. But next year things could change.
Yeah, it's like any unit in the military or in sports. You have that one guy who's bad luck because he can't handle it.
Hey, Sal, what is the organization's thoughts at this point on Dorial Green-Beckham? They made the trade. Obviously, they were hoping to maybe catch lightning in a bottle with him. Do you have any insight on what they think about this guy who was a top talent who just hasn't been able to put it together yet?
I think they're just sort of trying to figure out whether the light bulb is going to go on, whether he can flip the switch. He's now had 10 weeks with the team. And he's not getting any better. So you have to make a decision at the end of the year as to whether or not you're going to keep him around and make an investment in him. Not just money-wise, Mike, but there's a lot more that goes into it. You're making an investment in time and effort that you're taking away from other players or other possible replacements. So, to me, the entire wide receiving corps, other than Jordan Matthews, is on probation. And they've got to figure out whether or not they can be NFL caliber wide receivers. But that's no revelation. I think that pretty much makes common sense, don't you?
Absolutely. No, I think they're all on blast right now because you could let's look at this game, because Friday, on Sal Pal Friday, you said it's okay if they lose the game, but they can't lose guys. Well, they lost Ryan Matthews, Sproles, who looks like he'll play. They lost Vaitai. They got beat up in that game. But they went toe-to-toe with the Seahawks for about a quarter and a half, and you can surmise if they catch the football and don't line up illegally, who knows where that game goes. But it comes back to the wide receivers have let them down time and time again, and that is their shortcomings right now. That position has held them back in numerous games.
Yeah, maybe I jinxed them. I hope I didn't. I hope I didn't, but I'm sure some of your listeners must have said, "Oh my gosh, Sal Pal said on Friday that the last thing that can happen is somebody get hurt, and there it is, bang, right off the bat."
I know I thought about it on Sunday when Matthews was reported out and then Sproles was reported out. I said the first thing was, man, I can remember Sal saying they can lose the game, just don't lose bodies. So let's fast forward to where they are now.
Mike, that's what happens when you play the Seahawks. When you play the Seahawks, you're in a street fight. The Seahawks will tell you they're going to beat you up, then they beat you up, and then they tell you that they just beat you up. And they love talking about it and doing it.
Yeah, you do.
And, they do. They have a gang fight mentality. And they beat up the Patriots, and they beat up the Eagles. The Eagles don't have that kind of mentality. They don't have that street toughness. They don't have that kind of swagger about them. And that's been the hallmark of the Seahawks for a long, long time. You know that, Mike? And, you look at it from this perspective. Right?
Yep.
The Eagles have played the Seahawks 3 times since 2011. In December of 2011, they went to Seattle. Andy Reid was the head coach. Vince Young was the quarterback. Eagles lost 31-14. December 7th, 2014, 3 years later, in Philly, Chip Kelly was the head coach. Mark Sanchez was the quarterback. Eagles lost 24-14. November 20th, this past Sunday, Pederson's the coach, Wentz is the quarterback. Eagles lose 26-15. 3 successive games, 3 different head coaches, 3 different quarterbacks over a 5-year period, the Eagles improved by 1 point.
But when you're saying this, I'm thinking in my head, they have not closed the gap on that team at all. And then
who's that an indictment of?
What do you got? The GM, front office, the owner?
Why is that even a question?
Right. Well, here's another interesting point about this team is, they're up against Seattle. You try to get a measuring stick, and you talked about it. It doesn't matter if they lose. But now moving forward, they've had a tough schedule. They got 4 out of their last 6 at home. Do you leave that Seattle game thinking, I saw enough to think 4 out of 6 at home will get this team on the right path?
No, not after losing the right tackle and 2 running backs.
So they got beat up enough. They got beat up enough, and it was a discouraging enough loss to kind of say this isn't the year for them.
Very difficult.
Sal Pal with us here, of course, Eagles and Packers. Let me get your take on the Packers. They've lost 4 in a row. Rodgers still playing well, but that defense has been a disaster. Is this the right time to be playing Green Bay?
Yeah, and the Football Power Index, I think, has the Packers now at 2% chance of making the postseason. 2% with Aaron Rodgers. That's a wow.
Yeah, that team, 4 straight losses. Looking at the game they played the other night, that secondary's terrible. So it should be, we'll see, Monday night back in Philadelphia. There's no better scene than a Monday night game in Philly, right, Sal?
Yep, and both teams have a season on the brink.
No doubt about it. All right, Sal Paolantonio. Sal, happy Thanksgiving to you and yours, and enjoy the day, enjoy the football, and we will talk for another Sal Pal Friday coming up.
Thanks, Mike.